Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Okay, so in the last class, we introduced complex numbers and studied complex valued functions defined on a domain in C. Domain simply means an open subset of C which is path connected. Path connected means given any 2 points, I can there's a continuous function from the interval to that with 0 going to the first point and 1 going to the second point. That's what path connected means, and open subsets which are path connected are called domains. And we stated the fact that every polynomial of degree n with complex coefficients has exactly n roots in C. It's called the fundamental theorem of algebra. Then we introduced the complex differentiability of a function from omega to C, where omega is an open subset of C. We also stated the fact that if f is once differentiable in omega, it is infinitely many differentiable in omega. That was all content of last time. So today we will derive the so-called Cauchy-Riemann equations. There are two Cauchy-Riemann equations, and these are partial differential equations, means equations containing partial derivatives. If f is complex differentiable at a point z0, then these two equations will be satisfied at the point a comma b. So these are some sort of easy, these are going to be some easy first order partial differential equations. So let's start. So from omega to C, suppose you have a differentiable function at z0. Then by definition, limit of fz minus fz0 upon z minus z0, limit as z tends to z0, this is equal to f prime z0. This limit exists. That is what it means to say that the function is differentiable at z0. Yeah, in the complex sense. In the last lecture, we stressed the point that the existence of this complex limit means a lot. The limit exists as z tends to z0 along any path. And to derive the Cauchy-Riemann equations, we will in particular look at the existence of this limit as z tends to z0 along the x direction and the y direction. So z is equal to x plus iy. Fz I can separate into real and imaginary parts is uxy plus I times vxy. Now as z tends to z0 in the x direction, let's compute f prime z0. What do we get? So by definition, this will be limit of f of z0 plus h minus f of z0 upon h. H tends to 0, h is a real number, h tends to 0 along the real axis. Now let's separate this into its real and imaginary parts. So I can write this as u of a plus h comma b minus u of a comma b plus I times v of a plus h comma b minus v of a comma b upon h. Yeah, so this is simply from step 1 to step 2, it is simply separating f into its real and imaginary parts. But what is, so this is separating the two limits. Limit of sum is sum of limits. So this is limit of u of a plus h comma b minus u of a comma b upon h plus I times limit of v of a plus h comma b minus v of a comma b upon h. But by definition, the first one is the partial derivative of u with respect to x at a comma b, and the second is the partial derivative of v with respect to x at a comma b. So it is ux at ab plus I times vx at a comma b, right? So when we computed f prime z0 by taking the limit as z tends to z0 along the real axis, the x-axis that is, then we got f prime z0 is equal to ux fab plus I times vx at ab. Ux simply means partial derivative of u with respect to x. Now exactly in the same way, ditto same argument shows that if we take limit in the y direction, we get f prime of z0 is equal to f of z0 plus I times k minus f of z0 upon I times k, limit as k tends to 0. So this is limit as z tends to z0 in the vertical direction. And exactly as above, if you compute this, this will be vy at a comma b minus I of ui at a comma b. Okay, exactly the same two lines of calculation will show that this is equal to vy minus I of ui. So this is just a consequence of applying definition. But now differentiability of f. at z naught, which is a plus ib, implies that ux, uy, vx and vy have to exist at a comma b, and they have to satisfy ux equal to vy and ui is equal to minus vx. Yeah, because if this limit has to exist, that means ux, vx, ui and vy have to exist first of all, and equating the two, equating what we get by taking limit along the x direction with what we get along the y direction, you get ux equal to vy and you get vx equal to minus ui, right? Just equating the third last line with the last line. Yeah. So you get ux equal to vy and ui equal to minus vx at a comma b. All this is happening at the point a comma b. So these are the Cauchy-Riemann equations. Very simple derivation and a straightforward consequence of limit along x-axis and y-axis being equal. And if Cauchy-Riemann equations are not satisfied at a point, then f is not differentiable at that point. If it is differentiable at the point, then Cauchy-Riemann equations have to be satisfied. Therefore, the equivalent statement is if Cauchy-Riemann equations are not satisfied, the function is not complex differentiable at that point. Okay, so let us take one simple example: fz equal to mod z square. Okay, this is of course a real function. So u of xy is equal to x square plus y square, and v of xy is equal to 0. Now, what do you get when you take ux equal to vx and vy are both 0 anyway. So ux and ui are also both 0, have to be 0 for Cauchy-Riemann equations to be satisfied. But what is the point at which both ux and ui are 0? Ux is 2 times x, ui is equal to 2 times y. So the only point at which both ux and ui are 0 is the point x comma y equal to 0, 0, the origin. So the Cauchy-Riemann equations are satisfied only at the origin. So we can conclude straight away that f is not differentiable at any point other than the origin. This much we can say straight away. Can we conclude that f is not differentiable at the origin? Can we conclude that f is differentiable at origin? We need to check, because Cauchy-Riemann equations only give us one direction. So far we only know that if it is complex differentiable, CR equations have to be satisfied. Now that CR equations are satisfied at the origin, we have to actually check whether it is complex differentiable. In other words, real and imaginary parts of f satisfying CR equations is necessary but not sufficient for f to be differentiable at this point. Okay, so this now in this, of course, this is a simple example, so we can explicitly compute the limit. So what is limit of fz minus f of 0 upon z minus 0? This is limit of mod z square upon z, limit as z tends to 0, and this is equal to 0, right? Okay, let's move on. So let's take another example. If z is equal to mod z bar square upon z, z is not 0, and 0 if z is equal to 0. So here again you can separate f into its real and imaginary parts. I am not going to explain that's a straightforward computation you can do on your own. So if you expand f into real and imaginary parts, you get u of xy is equal to this, whatever I've written, and v of xy is equal to whatever I've written. So this is separating f into its real and imaginary parts. So once again, check that CR equations are satisfied at the origin. You will get ux equal to vy equal to 1 and ui equal to minus vx equal to 0 at 0, 0. So here again, once again, as in the previous example, the Cauchy-Riemann equations are satisfied at 0, 0. This is just some mechanical computation you can do. All of you can do these differentiations better than me, so I'm not listing the steps. So just check that ux is equal to vy is equal to 1, ui equal to minus vx equal to 0 at the origin. But in this case, unlike the previous, f is not differentiable at 0. So once again, let us compute the limit. So limit as z tends to 0, fz minus f0 upon z minus 0. This is z bar square upon z square. Yeah, fz was z bar square by z. So when you do fz minus f0 upon z minus 0, you get z bar square by z square. What is this? this is limit as xy tends to 0, x minus iy square upon x plus iy square. Z bar is x minus iy, so this is x minus iy square upon x plus iy square. Everybody agrees so far? So now let us check that if I take limit along two different directions, you get different values. That's how we will conclude that f is not differentiable at the origin. So suppose x comma y tends to 0 comma 0 via either of the axis, then this limit is 1. Because suppose x is equal to, suppose for example y is equal to 0, then you get x square by x square, which is 1. Suppose x is equal to 0, then you will get minus iy whole square upon iy square, which is again equal to 1. So along either axis, if you take the limit is equal to 1. But now let's take the limit along the diagonal y equal to x. So if x tends xy goes to 0 via y equal to x, then what do you get? Let's put y equal to x, then you get x minus iy square upon x plus iy the whole square. So the x square cancels. So it's 1 minus I square upon 1 plus I square, and you can check that this is equal to minus 1. So the limit in this case does not exist. In one direction the limit is 1, in the other direction the limit is minus 1.
Sir, if we just check this second condition without checking the Cauchy-Riemann condition, is it enough to check differentiability?
Well, that is the definition. Yeah, that is certainly enough, because that is the definition of differentiability.
Yes.
So that is certainly enough, but yeah. In some cases, you see, the point is, for trivial reasons, the Cauchy-Riemann equations themselves won't be satisfied. So you won't have to compute the limit. Computing the limit can often be harder than just analyzing the Cauchy-Riemann equations.
Okay, sir.
Sometimes, not always, I'm saying. Anyway, this example in some sense is, it illustrates a conceptual point. That's why I've included it. But that CR equations being satisfied is not equivalent to differentiability. Now let's continue with the analysis. So if z is equal to x plus iy, then write x as z plus z bar and y as z minus z bar upon 2i. So let's write x and y in terms of z and z bar. Okay. And suppose for a moment, let's pretend that z and z bar are independent variables. So I'll formally apply chain rule. So what is del f by f is a function of, I can think of f as a function of x and y. X and y are now functions of z and z bar. So I can apply chain rule. So del f by del z is del f by del x times half plus del f by del y times 1 upon 2i. Which is half into del f by del x minus I del f by del y. This is what is del f by del z. Similarly, del f by del z bar is half into del f by del x plus I del f by del y. Okay. So motivated by this, we will introduce the symbols del by del z equal to half del by del x minus I del by del y, and del by del z bar equal to half del by del x plus I del by del y. Simply motivated by what we got in the computation in the previous slide. Okay, this is just a definition. So now, with using these symbols, Cauchy-Riemann equations can be rewritten as del f by del z bar equal to 0. Right? If you just compute del f by del z bar, you will, the content of both Cauchy-Riemann equations is in this del by del z bar equal to 0. See, so when you compute, this is a simple computation. Just expand f as u plus iv, then take del by del z bar of u plus iv. That means this half del by del x plus I del by del y applied to u plus iv. So you get half into bracket ux plus I uy plus vx plus I vy. Well, whatever. I mean, Yeah, yeah, what you just apply this half del by del x plus I del by del y, apply it to u plus iv, expand it out, use Cauchy-Riemann equations, and you will see that del by del z bar applied to f is 0 is equivalent to both the Cauchy-Riemann equations being satisfied. Just a one line computation which I have not included because it's very simple.
Yes, sir.
Maybe when you're attending the lecture, it's perhaps a good idea to have some pen and paper next to you. Sometimes a very small computation like this I may not include in the slides because it's completely mechanical. But you can try and do it then and there if you have pen paper. Okay, so Cauchy-Riemann equations can be written more compactly as del f by del z bar equal to 0. So, okay, in fact, I have written something del f by del z bar equal to half ux plus I vx plus I uy minus vy, and ux cancels with vy. Uy is equal to minus vx, so that is also 0. Yeah.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So del f by del x has a physical significance, right?
Yeah.
But does del f by
say it again.
Yeah, del f by del x has a physical significance, but does del f by del z carry a physical significance?
Well, del f, yeah, del f by del z is the complex derivative of f. This limit of f, del f by del z is equal to limit of fz minus fz naught by z minus z naught. This is the usual derivative, complex derivative is this del by del z. And the del by del z bar becomes 0 by Cauchy-Riemann equations. So physical significance means this is the complex derivative.
Okay.
So just compute this, do this one line computation and just check that del by del z of f is simply the usual derivative.
Okay.
Yeah, a good point. Yeah. So this is not the del by del z is not something new. It is just our usual derivative. Okay. Now let us see some. Let's explore a little better the connection between this complex differentiability and real differentiability that one knows from MA 105. So we can view this function. So if you have a function on omega, f from omega to c, I can treat it as a function of two real variables, as I've been saying, f of xy equal to u of xy comma v of xy. Think of it as a map from open subset of R2 to R2. For such functions in MA 105, you have seen the notion of total derivative. So recall what that was. So f is differentiable at a comma b if there exists a 2 cross 2 matrix df at a comma b such that norm of f of a plus h comma b plus k minus f of ab minus this df, this 2 cross 2 matrix applied to a at the point a comma b applied to the column vector h comma k. This norm upon norm of h comma k goes to 0 as h comma k goes to 0. Yeah, this is what I think what you call total derivative. So if there is such a 2 cross 2 matrix, then we say that f is differentiable at a comma b. So df at a comma b, in some sense, what is derivative supposed to be? Derivative in some sense is supposed to be the best linear approximation to a function at a point, right? This is how we understand derivative intuitively. So this df at a comma b is a 2 cross 2 matrix, which is the best linear approximation to the function f at a comma b. Yeah, linear function from R2 to R2 is going to be a 2 cross 2 matrix. This is the 2 cross 2 matrix. Okay. Of course, if total derivative exists, then all the partial derivatives exist, and df is simply given by this 2 cross 2 matrix ux, uy, vx, vy. So this is MA 105. Now and existence of partial derivatives does not imply existence of total derivative, but existence of partial derivatives which are continuous throughout the domain imply the existence of total derivative. Yeah, this is just really recalling what you already know. Now exercise. Show that if f is complex differentiable, then f is real differentiable. It is f has a total derivative as a function of two real variables, and show that the converse is not true. And at the moment, solve this exercise assuming the continuity of the partial derivatives. And we will see later that this assumption can be removed. It is automatic. That is to say that if f is holomorphic on a certain open set, the partial derivatives are automatically continuous. So this is not really an assumption at the moment. Solve it with this assumption. Yeah, so complex differentiable means real differentiable. And you will find any number of examples you want of functions for which the total derivative will exist, but the function will not be complex differentiable. So notice something very interesting I should mention that, okay, maybe I'll come to that a little later. Yeah, so clearly what is very clear right now is that complex differentiability is much stronger, right? Already the Cauchy-Riemann equations tell you that ux equal to vy and uy equal to minus vx are very stringent conditions on the function. And most real differentiable functions, even infinitely differentiable functions, are not going to satisfy this condition. So most functions which are differentiable in the real sense are certainly not complex differentiable. That is very clear. I mean, if you just randomly take if you randomly take two polynomials in two variables, u of xy and v of xy, they will not satisfy Cauchy-Riemann equations. So most real differentiable functions are not complex differentiable. So this will, so because of this, that's why the subject is also going to be significantly different in its flavor than real analysis or multivariable calculus, whatever you call it. Okay. So thus complex differentiability implies real differentiability and that the real and imaginary parts satisfy Cauchy-Riemann equations. This is the upshot of the discussion. Now let's ask for the converse. The moment you have something is true, you always ask, is the converse also true? So suppose we assume both. Suppose it is real differentiable and the real and imaginary parts satisfy Cauchy-Riemann equations. Is it complex differentiable? And the answer is yes. So let us prove this very basic fact. This proof is not difficult. So it takes a couple of pages. Okay, any doubts? So this is what we are going to prove now. Yeah, can I hear some yes and then I can go ahead?
Sir,
Yeah.
Can you explain the assumption again?
So I'm going to assume. Okay, so the previous discussion showed that complex differentiability implies real differentiability and real and imaginary parts satisfy Cauchy-Riemann equations. Now I'm just going to prove the converse. Begin with a function which is from open subset of C to R2, which is real differentiable and real and imaginary parts satisfy Cauchy-Riemann equations. We want to prove that the function is complex differentiable. Yeah. So let us see the proof. Since f is equal to u plus iv is real differentiable, we know that this limit u of xy v of xy minus u of ab v of ab minus ux uy vx vy applied to the column vector x minus a y minus b, this upon norm of x minus a y minus b, this is equal to 0 as xy tends to a comma b. This is just unraveling the definition of what it means to say that it is real differentiable at a comma b. This is okay, I suppose. Now note that the numerator is nothing but this fz minus fz naught minus alpha times x minus a minus beta times y minus b. This norm, when you write it using complex numbers, it's like saying if I have a column vector a comma b, its norm is the same as the norm of the complex number a plus ib, right? So just writing it using complex numbers, this is nothing but numerator is nothing but norm of fz minus fz naught minus alpha times x minus a minus beta times y minus b, where alpha is equal to ux plus I vx, beta is uy plus I vy. Yeah, just a matter of expanding out the things. Expand out this, and you will see immediately that just expand out this numerator, this whatever I have written in the beginning of this slide, and you will see that it is exactly the norm of the numerator at the end of the previous slide. Yeah, it really amounts to say it just really amounts to the very trivial statement that norm of a column vector a comma b is the norm of the complex, is the magnitude of the complex number a plus ib. That's all that is being used here. Now define eta z to be this fz minus fz naught minus alpha times x minus a minus beta times y minus b upon z minus z naught. So whatever I got at the end of the last slide is what I'm calling eta of z. And by definition of real differentiability, limit of eta z as z tends to z naught is equal to 0. This is what we have with us. Eta z is simply this. I mean, eta z is simply this last line without the norms. So eta of z is this, and observe that eta by definition, by hypothesis rather, limit of eta z as z tends to z naught is equal to 0. Thus, fz minus fz naught is equal to alpha times x minus a plus beta times y minus b plus eta z times z minus z naught, with eta z tending to 0 as z tends to z naught. I'm just cross multiply and rearranging the terms. And write this as just this can be easily rewritten fz minus fz naught is equal to alpha minus I beta upon 2 times z minus z naught plus alpha plus I beta upon 2 times z minus z naught bar plus eta of z times z minus z naught. So this alpha times x minus a plus beta times y minus b is just what I have written here, alpha minus I beta upon 2 z minus z naught plus alpha plus I beta by 2 z minus z naught bar. Okay, again this is going from the second last line to the second last equality to the last equality is it's a completely mechanical check, and therefore I'm not doing it. I mean, if one does this, then it does not really help in the understanding. Just expand it out.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah. Thus, fz minus fz naught by z minus z naught. So just bring the z minus, just divide both sides by z minus z naught. So fz minus fz naught by z minus z naught is del f by del z at z naught plus del f by del z bar at z naught times z minus z naught bar upon z minus z naught plus eta of z. Yeah, so this alpha minus I beta upon 2 is the same as del f by del z at z naught. So see, just notice. So just look at this. So just look at this first term, alpha minus I beta upon 2 times z. Yeah, I want to check that alpha minus I beta upon 2 is this del f by del z, and then similarly alpha plus I beta upon 2 is this del f by del z bar. That is what I'm claiming. But if you do alpha minus I beta upon 2, what is alpha? Alpha is ux. Look at the third line rather. Alpha is ux plus I vx, beta is ui plus I vy. So if you do alpha minus I beta, it is ux plus I vx minus I times ui plus I vy. So that is ux plus I vx minus I ui plus vy, right? So what you get is ux plus I vx plus, so v minus I ui can be replaced by Cauchy-Riemann equations by I vx, and vy can be replaced by ux. So finally what you get is ux plus I vx plus ux plus I vx upon 2. So that is 2 times ux plus I vx upon 2. So ux plus I vx. Yeah, I said this rather hurriedly, but this is very simple calculation. Just check that alpha minus I beta upon 2 is ux plus I vx, and ux plus I vx is what we have been calling del f by del z. The only reason I'm not writing a couple of steps here is because this is very simple computation which you can test.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, this limit eta z tends to 0.
Yeah.
It comes from this definition you just provided there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Are we not proving this, or
the line after observe that? No, that's the one you're talking about. No,
yeah,
that
yes,
is just a consequence of this limit being 0. Just the last line. See this last line. The left hand side of the last line is exactly norm of eta z.
Okay, sir.
And so if norm of something is 0, if limit of norm of something is 0, then that thing itself is going to 0. So that is why this is equal to 0. That is, in other words, that is from the hypothesis that f is real differentiable.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So write this way. So this is if you just So fz minus fz naught upon z minus z naught is del f by del z at z naught plus del f by del z bar at z naught times z minus z naught bar upon z minus z naught plus eta z. This is what you get when you sort of fill in the values of alpha and beta.